So today we are going to finish up Major Arcana. We are going to go over the last few cards that we have not covered in class yet. And we are also going to cover how Major Arcana cards are read and the history of the Major Arcana. So, So for those of you, first of all, please raise your hand or type in the chat or give me something if you have been to one of our Major Arcana classes before. Let me know either in the chat or raise your hand or something. Cool. Awesome. Okay, good. Awesome. So quite a few of you have. Good. Wonderful. And it's totally okay that some of you have not too. Okay. So because there are quite a few people who have not been to a Major Arcana class before, I am going to very, very briefly go over the history and the basics. So if you look at a deck of tarot cards, it is very obvious once you learn the history that part of the deck stems from a completely different culture and a completely different time period than the other part of the deck. The minor arcana cards, which are the cards that have like the Ace of Pentacles, the Two of Pentacles, the Three of Chalices, the Four of Wands, the King of Pentacles, the Queen, and so on. Those cards, the cards that basically resemble a typical deck of playing cards, those are much, much older than the Major Arcana. The minor arcana cards started in ancient Arabia and Iran, and they are based off of Arabic numerology. And Arabic numerology is about 1,500 to 2,000 years old. And you read the minor arcana cards by taking the number and the suit and putting them together to create a symbolic meaning. And so you would take the symbolic meaning of the number 5 using Arabic numerology, pair it with the symbolic meaning of pentacles to then create your own interpretation of the meaning of the 5 of Pentacles. So that is how you would read the minor arcana. Now the major arcana came over from the Middle East during trade, during war, during a lot of different times and things that happened between the Middle East and Europe. And it came specifically to Italy. And when it came to Italy, Italy loved the beautiful way in which they used these cards. And it was used in the Middle East. It was used at festivals, it was used at feasts, at celebrations, at get-togethers. as a game that helped to read your future. It was a divination game. So if any of you have ever played games like um, the little cootie catchers, where people like pick a number and pick a color, or MASH, or any of the little divination games that we play as children, where you can like read somebody's future using kind of a childlike game, that is very much how the deck of playing cards was used, but instead, you used Arabic numerology and suits such as pentacles, staves, chalices, and swords to read somebody's personality, to read their future, to read their past, and things like that. So when this type of divination game came over on trade ships or in many different ways over to Italy, they embraced and loved this tradition and this practice. And they decided that they were going to add cards. And the cards that they added were the major arcana. But the major arcana are read completely differently. The major arcana cards are read using tropical astrology and using planets, and also using European symbology. So today we are going to go over the astrological symbol, the planetary symbol, and the European symbology tied and associated with all of the major arcana cards. Really about 5, because we already went over all of the others in previous classes, and you can check those classes out on YouTube. Or we also do repeats of classes all the time, so you can check them out live as well. We do repeat classes almost every month. So, does anybody have any questions so far? Now, I do go very, very, very deep into the history. So if you are really interested in that little bit of history that I just gave you about the Middle East and how they were the very, very first ones to create tarot, because if you were to just Google this right now, and I also encourage you to try, and this is something that is really sad about westernized education sometimes, is that if you were to just Google who created tarot, you would get Italy. And how sad that is, because there's so much history to it that is not true. If you're talking about the tarot decks that we use today that have the 78 cards and the major arcana and the minor arcana, yes, the major arcana were created in Italy. But to completely discredit the Middle East, ancient Arabia, and Iran for giving us the minor arcana and the entire way that we read the minor arcana, because it's based on Arabic numerology and Arabic symbology and Arabic elemental magic. If you completely discredit that, you are giving only half the history, and I hate that. I'm also Middle Eastern, and I'm Arabic, and so it made me, one of the reasons I fell in love with tarot was because it was helping me to connect with my own culture. So yeah, I think it's really sad that we only give half of the history whenever you Google that information. But anyway, if you are interested in hearing the entire history, where I dive really deep into the history of tarot, please go to our YouTube channel that somebody else just posted in the chat. Thank you so much. And watch the minor arcana videos. In those videos, you will get a very deep dive into the history of the minor arcana. So, before I move on, I want to make sure I don't go too fast. Does anybody have any questions so far? Have I lost anyone yet? Awesome. Cool. Okay. So here on the screen, you can read the slide. But for those of you who don't know already what astrology is, astrology has been around in different cultures throughout the entire world for thousands of years. And a lot of times when we say the word astrology, we immediately think of tropical astrology. And tropical astrology is a form of astrology that has its roots in Egyptian astrology, but then once it came to Greece and Lebanon, it changed. And then, of course, Greece and Europe really changed it into what we know now and what we know today. Where we have these astrological signs such as Aries and Taurus and Leo and Sagittarius and the different planets that they rule over and all of these things. But there are cultures from almost every single country in the world that have their own indigenous form of astrology, such as Mayan astrology in South America, and Incan astrology and Aztec astrology, as well as different forms of astrology from Uganda and Ethiopia, and different forms of astrology from China, Japan, and the Philippines. They all have their own form of indigenous astrology. And so when I say the word tropical astrology, we are talking about westernized astrology that has a lot of its roots in Egypt and Greece. And it is evolved into the astrology that most of us in the United States or Canada or Europe would know of today. And that is the astrology that was used to create the major arcana within tarot, because it was Italy who created the roots of the major arcana. So astrology is the study of the movements and relative positions of celestial objects. Astrology has been dated to at least the 2nd millennium BCE and has its roots in calendrical systems used to predict seasonal shifts and to interpret celestial cycles as signs of divine communication. Many cultures have attached importance to astronomical events, and some, such as the Hindus, Chinese, and the Mayan, developed elaborate systems for predicting terrestrial events from celestial observations. So, another thing that frustrates me, even though it is in this slide, in the bibliography section of our website, I give you the resources in which I got all this information. So this information was not written by me. I did get it out of a book. The book that I got it out of was called Planets for Pagans, written by Rena Shesso. And even though I absolutely adore this book, I absolutely adore this author, it's fabulous information. But one thing that has slightly bugged me is that when they call it, I don't call it Western astrology. I call it tropical astrology. And it says here, Western astrology, one of the oldest astrological systems still in use, can trace its roots to 19th through 17th century BCE, Mesopotamia, from which it spread to ancient Greece, Rome, and eventually Central and Western Europe. Now, if anybody here knows where Mesopotamia is, it is the Middle East. Now, when you think of Western, I think that most people, when you think of Western, typically tend to think of not the continent of Asia. Usually the continent of Asia is considered Eastern. So why, whenever we talk about Western things, and then we say that it originated in the Middle East, do we still call it Western? I don't really appreciate that terminology. I think that it makes people very confused, and it makes it sound like Mesopotamia is in Europe when Mesopotamia is in Asia. So anyway, I call it tropical astrology. Tropical astrology has its roots in, like I said, the Middle East, like I said, which is Lebanon, and Greece and Egypt, like I had said before. So astrology consists of a number of belief systems that hold that there is a relationship between astronomical phenomena and events or descriptions of personality in the human world. The major arcana cards are defined and interpreted based on their astrological association, element, and symbology. To truly understand the major arcana, you must understand their astrology. Their astrological association will help you to understand their element. So, for example, we are going to go over multiple cards. If a card represents Gemini, then that card represents air. We are going to talk about the definition of air and what it means when we are using, because remember, the major arcana, though they were created in Italy, they were using an already created system that had already been developed, created, and used for hundreds of years in the Middle East. And they were using a system from the Middle East that was based on Middle Eastern and Arabic elemental magic. Elemental magic, most of what a lot of people who study witchcraft, paganism, esoteric practices in the United States, in Europe, in Canada, in a lot of the more Western side of the world, a lot of times the elemental symbology that they talk about, earth, air, fire, and water, and what earth, air, fire, and water symbolize, are all have its roots in the Middle East, in Mesopotamia. And so when we talk about how Gemini is an air sign, Gemini is going to be the tropical astrology bit, but the symbology of air stems from the Middle East. So we are going to learn the Arabic symbology for air, as well as the meaning for Gemini, and what planet is associated with Gemini, and the symbols within the specific card. And all of that put together is going to tell us how to read that card and what it would mean about that person's life, their past, their present, their future, their personality, their love life, all of the things. So, as a little cheat sheet and as a way to help you memorize the planetary associations with each astrological sign, I have a little chart here for you. So every single astrological sign has a celestial association. Most of them have planetary associations, but things like Leo are going to have, Leo, for example, is the sun, and Cancer is the moon. So those aren't planets, but they are celestial objects. And everything on this slide, I'm not going to read. Feel free to read it. I'm going to stay on this slide for just a minute so that everybody has a chance to kind of look over this chart and to read the slide a little bit, but I already said everything that's on this slide, so I don't want to repeat myself and be too redundant. But while I give everybody a chance to look over this slide and to look over the cheat sheet, does anybody have any questions so far? Because I know I'm going a little fast. The reason I'm going a little fast is because we have already covered all of this in previous classes, but I just wanted to do a short review for the people who this is their first class. That's a wonderful question. So we do have classes that cover your natal chart and your rising sign and all of your other signs, not the tarot classes. So if you go to our YouTube channel and you click on the astrology section, we have an incredible astrology professor who is a million billion times better at astrology than I am. She has all of her certifications in astrology, went to school for astrology. She teaches our astrology classes, and yes, she goes very, very deep into that. Not in our tarot classes, no. Of course. Okay. So in many of our previous classes, I use the Fool as a fantastic example. Because the Fool is not only a very, very important card, but also because the Fool is a very, very easy card to read. Most Fool cards have all the symbology laid out very clearly and easy for you to see. It's very easy to know what this card means just by looking at most of the pictures that are depicted on the card without even knowing its astrological meaning. But we are going to use the Fool as an example for our first card, even though we go over in every single class. And for people watching on YouTube, I'm very sorry that every single video starts with the Fool. For people who have watched us on YouTube, you've probably heard me describe the Fool 5,000 times. But we are going to briefly go over the Fool. So the Fool, and I'm going to go back to those pictures in a second so you can see what I mean. The Fool represents Uranus, Aries, Aquarius, and Mars. The reason that it represents Mars, and Mars isn't on here because, well, actually I probably should put Mars on here, but I thought Aries did a fine job of describing Mars all on its own. And if you go over here, the reason that it represents Mars is, of course, Mars is associated with Aries, as you can see in this chart here. So, Uranus is the planet of rebellion and eccentricity and adventure, change, revolution, risk, unpredictability. Uranus brings with it a new way of looking at things, and its approach is best met with an expanded consciousness. Uranus is just that planet that is always wants to be on the cutting edge of things. It wants to be a path setter. It wants to be a trend setter. It wants to do things its own way, create a new mold. It doesn't really care about anything traditional or the way that anything has been done in the past. It wants to create its own way of doing things, and it doesn't really think about the fact that some things are done the way that they're done because 500 people made a bunch of mistakes and realized that this is the best way to do something. Uranus wants to figure that out all on their own. They want to make all the mistakes. They want to break tradition and figure out if maybe they can figure out a better way to do it. It takes Uranus 84 years to complete its trip around the zodiac. It is an androgynous energy and rules Aquarius and the 11th house. Uranus rules earthquakes and other natural disasters as well. It's extremely impulsive. It only cares about freedom, creativity, and keeping with its very sudden and sometimes violent and often unexpected manner. So yeah, Aries is a symbol of rebirth, a symbol of renewal and growth. It is a new beginning. It is the start of a brand new adventure, bursting with youthfulness and enthusiasm and life force. It is the very, very beginning of the reawakening after the winter. It is the first start of spring. It is inspiration and being extremely impulsive and assertive. And this is kind of why I didn't put Mars on here, because Mars is going to represent the exact same thing. Except for Mars is going to be a lot more focused on it. Mars is going to be a little bit more violent and a little bit more headstrong and stubborn, and a little bit more, they want to do it their way or the highway. They know best, and they can be very forceful. They take assertive to a whole new level. But in essence, Aries does a very good job of describing Mars. And of course, the name Aries is derived from Eris, the Greek god of war. So, which does a great job once again of describing Mars. And Aquarians are visionaries, progressives. They spend time thinking about how everything could be better. They really want to engage the entire world in creating revolution and creating rebellion and creating philosophical, complex conversations. They want to make tons of friends and help them all to aspire to their goals, and to also bring together groups of people who all have the same goal so they can stand up and change the world. They love to create collaborative efforts towards the greater good. So it's really easy to see, and this is why I use this as an example. If you take every single thing that I just said, the representation of Uranus, Aries, Mars, and Aquarius, you put them all together and you get the Fool. So let's go back and look at the Fool. Now, remember that I said that you have to take everything that I just said, the planets and the astrology, as well as the element and the symbols within the card that are represented. So you have to look at the card when it's major arcana. And you have to look at the card and kind of look at the different symbols that are put into the card, which sometimes can differ from deck to deck, and sometimes relies on the intuitiveness of the reader. Now, you shouldn't take this too far. Some readers, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine, just look at the card and the picture and read it solely and only based on that. And that's, in my opinion, kind of negating all of the very deep history of the magic within these cards. And part of the esoteric properties of these cards and the magic within these cards is their astrological association and their elemental association. So I don't think that you can just solely look at the picture and read the card. You need to also understand the astrology and the elements as well. But you can also take into account the symbology on the card as well. So now that I have told you the definition of the Fool, kind of, we've gone over the astrological aspect. We haven't gone over the elemental aspect yet. We will get there. Can you see what I was saying and how it's depicted in these cards, and what the definition of the Fool would be if it came up in a reading? And that's a real question. I want you to answer. Can you see what I am talking about and what it would mean in a reading? And what do you think the Fool would mean in a reading so far, now that we've gone over the astrology? What do you think it would mean if a real human being got this in a reading, based on the astrology we've gone over and the planets? Yes, I love it. Headed to a new journey, energy to start a new task and project. Yes. A risk taker. Definitely. Exactly. Yes. Oh, I love that. A call to action. I love that. And that's definitely bringing out a lot of the astrological meanings that we talked about. Definitely. Yeah. Yes. Jumping into new adventures. Definitely. New beginnings, taking chances, unforeseen outcomes, a leader. Totally. Yes. Awesome. So then we are going to talk about the elements. And this card specifically is represented by, because it's Aquarius and Uranus, those two are going to represent air. And it is represented by Aries and Mars, and those are going to represent fire. So if we look here at, this is coming from me. This, I did not get this from a source or from a book. I just wrote this because I have been studying elemental symbology for a million years. And so this is a very small definition of air. I encourage you to go do your own research on the definition and symbolic meaning of air. But air symbolizes freedom, the unknown, something you can't touch. It is intellectual thought. It is the breath of life, the symbol of cleansing and purity. Air is wild and untamed, but graceful and ever-changing. Air is the steam that erupts from the ground, the gust that blows over the ocean, and the light breeze that flows through the meadow. It is the train of thought that passes through your conscious mind. Air is the logic and mathematics of the universe. It is the knowledge and wisdom that grows inside all sentient beings throughout their lifetime. So air is knowledge and wisdom and communication, mathematics, logic. It is also literal air and gas and wind, and it is everything that exists within your own mind. It is your thoughts, your anxiety, it is overthinking, and it is also being able to take your knowledge and your education and to create something beautiful. It is inventiveness. It is all of the beautiful things that we do with our wisdom and our intelligence and thoughts. And fire, just on the next page. Fire is the eruption of passion. It is the element of rebirth and destruction, the phoenix that emerges from the ashes with fire bursting from their soul. Fire is rebellion and impulse, the spark inside of all sentient beings. Fire is the warmth and love that consumes us and the actions that create the building blocks of our personality. Fire is the sun and the raw energy produced by its rays. It is the divinations that we use to communicate with energy and other realms. It is the most raw and pure form of magic, the first magic of our ancestors, a type of energy that can seemingly be created from nothing. Fire is our actions, all of our actions that create magic, our actions that just create our personality, that create our day-to-day lives. It is every single form of action. And so a way that I really like to show off fire and air and how they work together, because when you are looking at a card that depicts both fire and air. So fire, for those of you who have ever studied neuroscience or psychology, inside of your brain, the action potential that happens to create a thought is an electrical pulse. So the electrical pulse inside of your brain that gives energy to your neurons to be able to transfer information to each other, to transfer neurotransmitters between each neuron. inside of your brain. That is an electrical pulse. That is an action potential, and it is fire. The thought that is created from that electrical pulse is air. So the energy within you that helps you to create movement, that helps you to walk, that helps you to think and breathe and move and do everyday tasks and to create and to love, the actual energy that helps you to do that is fire. Whereas the thoughts that are created in your mind and the knowledge that is built is air. So those are the elements tied to this card. Taking those elements and the astrological meaning and the planets, putting them all together and pairing them with the symbols and colors and everything that you see depicted on the card, taking all of that information, putting it together, gives you the gigantic, huge, complex definition that is the Fool. And what this card would mean if it came up in someone's reading. And major arcana cards, if you really choose to read them in the complex way that they can be read in, a major arcana card can tell an entire story. It can tell an entire person's personality, life, journey. It can be as huge and giant and long and complex as you want it to be, or not even as you want it to be, but as much as you would like to tell the person in their reading. This card can take 35 minutes to talk to a person about why the Fool came up in their reading and what it means. If you truly take all the planets, the astrology, the elements, and the symbology, put it together to create the really deep and philosophical meaning that this card can have. So, does anybody have any questions about everything that I just went over? Okay. So, we are now going to come back. We are going to come back to this slideshow. But we are going to go to the website. So this is our website. I will link it in the chat right now. So if you would like to, you can follow along with us. Also, if my screen is too small and you would like to follow along on your own screen, that is another reason that I'm going to share the link with you as well. Also, this presentation that I am showing you right now, this slideshow presentation, is also on our website as well. The tarot class presentation is on here as well. So we are going to look at astrology within tarot, and you have all the little cheat sheets available to you as well. And of course, the Fool that we just went over. But because this is one of the later classes, we are going to focus on much later cards. So I'm pretty sure that, what have we gotten through? What do we have left? We did death. Okay. So we did the world. We did. Now this website is being updated. It should be fully updated by within the next few days, so that every single card is going to have a big giant like description like the Fool does. But I'm handwriting all this, so it does take me a while. So I think that we left off. I'm pretty sure that we left off on, let's start at, I'm gonna look really quick. Pretty sure we have to start at the tower. Let me check really quick. Okay, cool. So yes, we are going to start with the tower. So the tower is a very intense card. The one of the things that actually kind of annoys me when people give tarot readings is that I understand that when you give a tarot card reading, a lot of people really enjoy telling you that, you know, even though this card does have some very dark meanings, that there's always a silver lining on every cloud, and that, you know, it's going to be okay. Um, and that, you know, within paganism, that death always means rebirth. Just because death, especially the death card, does mean rebirth. And just because in a lot of pagan traditions that the symbology of death does mean rebirth, that does not mean that there are not tarot cards that mean that horrible things are happening in your life. And as human beings, something that all of us know is that, number one, when you are going through something really, really, really horrible and awful, a lot of times you don't want to be told, don't worry, this is also a good thing. Sometimes really horrible, terrible, awful things are happening, and there is no silver lining, and it just sucks, and it's awful, and you're depressed and sad and angry, and that's it. There is no silver lining. And I think that the Tower card is a very good depiction of that. That sometimes things just suck, and it's okay to say that things suck, and that there isn't a silver lining. This isn't a good thing. You are not a better person because of your trauma. That it just sucks, and that you're gonna yeah, that's all there is to it. And so the Tower card is associated with, now the website will be updated and it will tell you which astrological sign this is associated with, but just so everybody here knows, the Tower card is associated with Scorpio and Aries. So because it's associated with Aries, it is also associated with Mars. And you can see that if you scroll up, as we talked about before, Aries is associated with Mars up here. And then we also have Scorpio, which is associated with Pluto. So as we know, with Aries and Mars, you get a lot of that very intense war, and you get that very intense violence. You get a lot of that energy from fire. And also, though, you do get a lot of that impulse and energy from Aries as well, and a lot of that confidence and intensity and energy, and that with Mars, that you also get ton of that fire and rebellion, and that you also get a lot of destruction, and destruction does equal rebirth. But sometimes when it comes to the tower, the rebirth means starting over and having a big, huge portion of your life destroyed and having it fall apart. And the rebirth part of it is just you being forced to start over and to start from square one and to start from the beginning. And so instead of having you look at a very boring screen, we are going to look at some images of the tower card. While we go over, here we go. Can I make this bigger? This is not the one I clicked on. Okay. Of course not. Let's see if maybe this one will get bigger for us. Okay. Okay. So we have the tower card. So it is also depicted by Scorpio, and Scorpio is a water sign, and Scorpios tend, the representation of Scorpio tends to be extremely emotional, extremely hard to read, but also extremely intelligent, very persistent, very down to earth and dedicated, wise. And then you add that element of water in there and you get emotion. And emotion can be any range of emotion. And I know we didn't go over water. We will. I guess we could do that now. So if we look at water and the definition of water and what it means, water is going to be the emotional whirlwind that swirls through us. Water is the transformation of our consciousness. It symbolizes the phases that we move through in life. And a lot of times it can be really difficult to move through different phases of life, whether that be through aging or whether that be changing and having a relationship end and having a new relationship begin. It is transformation. It can also be joy and happiness and empathy and love. And it can be healing and beautiful and incredible, but can also be depression and loneliness and anger and sadness. And it can also be grief, and emotions range in such a huge way. And also emotions aren't necessarily logical. You could be having a wonderful time and still be depressed and feeling extremely sad and feeling extremely lonely and feeling angry. And emotions are unpredictable, and emotions don't care about logic, and emotions, our mental health doesn't care about logic and reasoning. And so emotions are extremely unpredictable, and that is something that is depicted highly within the tower. So the representation of the tower is that something in life completely fell apart, and it is something that is affecting you emotionally. And that is where a lot of that Scorpio energy comes in, with feeling lonely, emotional, but also feeling like you have to hold it all inside, that there's nobody that you can talk to about it, because a lot of that Scorpio energy is the fact that nobody understands you, that there's nobody that can empathize with you, that you are somebody that feels very separated from the rest of the world. Obviously, there are incredible, beautiful, amazing things about Scorpio. And when we talk about other cards, Scorpio has a much prettier light to it. But when we're talking about the Tower card, you are going to get a lot of those lonely feelings from Scorpio, and a lot of those because we are not just looking at just Scorpio and water and Pluto, but also at the actual symbology of the card itself, like we talked about. And when you look at the Tower card, you can see very, very clearly that the symbology within the Tower card is not great. But I really like, the reason I picked this one too is because it's really easy to see the fire and the water. So you have the building that is on fire and the water that is underneath. And so you have all of that intense war and impulsivity and energy and destruction of Aries and fire, and then a lot of that emotional turmoil and grief and sadness and depression from the water and the Scorpio and Pluto. And the reason that in this card specifically, we aren't talking about the incredible, amazing, beautiful qualities of things like Aries, like we were with the Fool, is because of the actual symbology within the card itself. And the symbology within the card itself of the Tower is destruction and pain and grief and having a large part of your life fall apart. And yeah. Does anybody have anything to add about the Tower card, or their depiction of Scorpio and their depiction of Pluto, their depiction of Aries and Mars, and how it might fit in to help describe the Tower card? Definitely extremely unpredictable. Yeah, which we kind of talked about a little bit with water and the unpredictability of water. But yeah, definitely, I completely agree. Yes. Oh, I love that you brought that up. Yeah, definitely. Shattered preconceptions, which can definitely be seen within the symbology of Scorpio, for sure. I love that you brought that up. Yeah, feel free to take yourself off mute. And if you have something to add about the Tower card, or about Scorpio, or about water, or about Aries and fire, please feel free to take yourself off mute and talk about it as well if you would like to, and if you would like to share. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the Tower card? Do you feel as though you have a good understanding of the Tower card, what it represents? This card is going to represent a time in your life where everything feels as though it's falling apart. You are going to feel very emotional, very destructive, like your life itself is completely falling apart um, due to destruction and due to impulsivity and due to possibly bad choices that were made, but not necessarily by you, by other people in life, or just by a really large situation that just went wrong. And as you can see in this card, people are falling into water, and it is just falling deep into really horrible emotions and falling into depression, falling into grief, falling into anger and sadness, and feeling as though there is no way out. And the building represents your life and how it feels like it's on fire. Okay. So it doesn't look like anybody has any questions or any more to add. Please feel free to talk more about your knowledge about the astrology and the elements and the cards. What did I mention before the building? I was talking before about just the energy of Scorpio and Aries, and of the horrible emotions attached to this card, and the horrible and traumatic things going on in your life that make it feel as though everything is falling apart. Um, of course. Um, no, and that's totally fine. And just because this card itself comes up in a spread, and that it does typically tend to represent, in the way that you said, doom and gloom, that does not mean that the other cards surrounding it do not add context, and that the other cards surrounding it, just because something falls apart in your life, does not mean that that can't open doors and open space for transformation, and that blessings cannot follow this card. It just means that this card alone and by itself represents turmoil and grief and sadness and depression. But turmoil and grief and sadness and depression can open space for transformation. We are humans, and going through something where you feel like your life is falling apart can open doors for transformation and for blessings. It just means that this card on its own is not going to represent blessings or space for transformation. But usually these cards are not going to be depicted by themselves. They are going to be depicted in a spread. And a spread of cards can mean many things. The cards around the tower can mean many things. Yep, exactly. And just because, like someone said above, a rude awakening and having something really bad happen in your life can lead to a new way of looking at the world. And usually this card is never going to come up by itself. is going to come up around other cards. And the other cards around it can mean that this is going to open your eyes so that you can leave the horrible situation and welcome in something that is a lot more beautiful. But this card on its own and by itself has a lot of grief and turmoil in it. Yep. Yeah, exactly, Tammy. Yep. So a lot of times it depends on the cards that are going to show up around this card. A lot of people get this card, and inside the spread that they have, the things that they're going through and having a big situation fall apart, having something fall apart in their life, having a lot of grief, having a lot of turmoil and a lot of sadness and anger can lead to transformation and lead to wisdom and lead to you making better decisions, or lead to even just you leaving and finding something better and finding something you deserve and getting yourself out of this situation, which can lead to blessings. Sometimes people get this card and it leads to a really hard time in their life. It all depends on the cards that show up around it in the spread. Okay. So I need to have not so many tabs open so that I can figure out where we were. Okay. Nope, that's not where we were. Okay. It's fine. We're just gonna go back here. Anyway, so if nobody has any more comments to make about the tower, we are going to move on. And after the tower, we have the devil. And the devil is represented by Capricorn. So we are going to do the same thing with the devil, and I'm going to erase some tabs. Okay. There we go. So we are going to take a look at the devil card. So let's find a cool devil card with a lot of symbology. This one's cool. This one has a lot of symbology in it. Let's see if we can zoom in. That's too zoomed in. Okay. Huh. Okay. Anyway, can everybody come on? Wow. Okay. Come on. There we go. Anyway, can everybody see that? Is that zoomed in okay? Okay. Wow. You need to stop. Just we're just gonna do that. So the devil card is represented by Capricorn. So if we go here and we look, so of course Capricorn is going to be represented by Earth. And if we look at Earth and the definition of Earth, we're going to go over the definition of Earth and also Capricorn is represented by Saturn. And so if you would like to read the slide on Earth, and we're going to go over Earth a little bit. And Earth is a representation of all things that exist on this plane. All things. So Earth is going to be the representation of your house and your car and your family and friends. And it is going to be the trees and the flowers and every single thing that exists on planet Earth, which can also be your career and your money. And it can also be things like your food, and then it can also have a lot of deep metaphorical meanings, such as growth, the cycle of life, and grounding. And it also reminds us of our immortality. So it is, when I talk about our immortality, it is this idea, and I'm not talking necessarily about people's belief systems. Whether you believe in reincarnation or you believe that our soul is immortal and that it goes somewhere when we die, that's not necessarily what I am talking about. I am talking about the literal immortality of the particles that make up our body. So when you die, the particles that make up your body, the atoms and every particle that makes up you is just going to get redistributed and continue existing. No energy and no particle is created or destroyed. So all of the atoms that make up you are going to continue to exist. The electrons that make up you are all going to continue to exist. The energy that makes up you is going to continue to exist. And it is just going to become part of the universe again. And we all have different beliefs when it comes to death and what happens when you die, but literally your body, just your literal body and the energy that makes up your body is going to continue to exist in the universe. And it always has existed within the universe. And so the symbol of Earth reminds us of that. And Earth is also represented, it is life, it is death, it is rebirth. And a lot of times when people are talking about the symbol of Earth, they use the very common phrase, as above, so below, which has many different philosophical meanings depending on what practice you follow, what spirituality you follow. And some people don't even really believe in the concept of as above, so below. In many of our classes, we go deep into that. So I'm not going to go deep into that. We have a lot to cover in this class. But from the earth we all came, and to the earth we all shall return, is kind of the idea. And there's a much deeper philosophical meaning of that we do go deep into in other classes. But Earth is stability and healing and grounding, and it's all things that exist on this planet. And it is also your career, your goals, your growth, and the roots that you set down literally on this planet, and your connection to all things that exist on this planet. And when we talk about Capricorn, and we talk about kind of how this card represents Capricorn, a lot of times the Devil card is depicted symbolically as the part of Capricorn that is very stubborn, but also very down to earth, and really sees things exactly as they are when it comes to seeing, so a Capricorn isn't going to, when it comes to this card, but a Capricorn isn't going to see things in a very metaphorical, philosophical way, like an air sign would, like an Aquarius or a Gemini. They aren't going to see things like a fire sign would, where a fire sign is always ready to start a new adventure and sees everything as an opportunity and gets really, really excited and sees everything in a much more go-getter, almost everything is very exciting and everything is achievable and everything can be grabbed at, and they have the potential to do anything that they want to do and to express themselves in any way that they want to. And whereas a Capricorn is going to feel as though they see things in a much more literal way. And the devil is a depiction of that. And so we're going to talk about that. First of all, I would love to ask you, because I think this is a really fun one. Hold on. Come on. Exit. Thank you. So when we talk about the devil card, number one, the big things that stick out for the devil card is going to be feeling very overwhelmed, feeling very guilty a lot of the time, feeling as though you always need to apologize, feeling a little bit trapped. But the devil card also brings in this idea too of working very, very hard to achieve growth, that you always feel as though you want more and that you could be doing better. So it's not guilt as in you did something wrong, but that you could always be doing better. And you feel trapped in this cycle of feeling as though you have all the tools, which is why I loved this card. If you notice, this card has a staff, a sword, a chalice, and a pentacle or a coin represented in the card. The people at the bottom are holding that, and they're standing right next to shackles, but that they aren't actually attached to the shackles. They aren't actually trapped. And the devil card is this feeling, a feeling as though you are trapped in this cycle of having all of the tools to be able to have growth and success, to be able to accomplish your dreams and your goals, to be able to feel prosperity and feel as though you are getting towards what you really, really want and growing in a way that makes you feel successful. And yet, for some reason, you feel as though it's not happening and you're not getting there, and like something is holding you back, tying you down, and you feel trapped. But in reality, which is why I picked this specific picture of the card, you're not. In reality, you are not trapped. You don't really have a reason to feel guilty. You aren't lazy, and you aren't being tied down. But you always feel as though you should be doing more. You should be doing better. And this is very Capricorn. But anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on what Capricorn means. Exactly, Tammy. Feeling as though you're trapped, but you're not. But you don't know how or why. That is such a wonderful way of putting it. Exactly. And feeling as though you work so hard, you try so hard, you do so much, you have all the tools, you have all the knowledge, you have the research, you have been doing all of this growth and work on yourself. And yet it's kind of that idea of having what people kind of depict when they talk about the devil is having this devil or essence next to you that keeps making you feel like you're not doing good enough. But in reality, The devil card does not mean that you're not doing good enough. You are doing good enough. You are doing amazing. You are growing. You are changing. You are being prosperous. You have all the tools. You are wise and you are doing your best and you are trying so hard, but there's something within you that is making you feel as though you aren't, and that you're lazy, and that you are not good enough. That if you just weren't so lazy, if you just tried a little harder, that things would be better. But in reality, none of those things are true. Yep. Stuck in, I would say, instead of self-hatred, I would maybe say self-doubt. But yeah, like you said, yeah, self-doubt. Yeah. But exactly, we're feeling shame. And a lot of times people, when we talk about Capricorn, we talk about Saturn, a lot of times it is also the reason that you might feel this way is due to trauma, due to the voice in your head, due to the way that you were raised, being raised as though, you weren't good enough, or that a lot of the beautiful, amazing things that you're excited about aren't things that you should be excited about, that people didn't give you any of the validation that you deserved. But that is all just inferences. That is not necessarily what the devil card means. The devil card is this idea of the fact that you really and truly are. You have all the tools in your hands. You are doing your absolute best. You are wise. You are knowledgeable. You are educated. You are empathetic, you are loving, you are caring, you are strong, you are doing all of these amazing things, and you really are benefiting from them. You are growing and transforming and becoming exactly who you are working towards being. And yet you still feel as though you are not good enough, and that it's not good enough, and that you're doing something wrong. Because of its very strong, because it only represents Capricorn, so it is tied to this idea of earth. Some people do read it as materialism, but that is only because of its strong association with earth. But really, the only reason that it represents, or that some people read it as representing materialism, is because a lot of times when I talk about how people feel as though they aren't good enough, usually that has to do with the fact that they think that they're not prosperous enough or wealthy enough. But that is a very westernized idea. And so it's definitely a controversial aspect of the devil. It can mean that you feel like you aren't good enough because you aren't wealthy enough, but that's a very westernized idea, like I said. So like, yes and no, if that makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Imposter syndrome, imposter syndrome is a fantastic way to say that. Yes, yes, definitely. So imposter syndrome is this idea that even though you are, um, even though you are extremely good at something, you feel as though you're an imposter. Like you're pretending to be really, really good at something. Like let's say your job. Let's say you're working a job and you get a promotion, and you are doing really, really well. You still have this idea in the back of your head that if anybody found out that really you're just pretending to be good at this, and really you're not actually as good as people think you are, that you would be found out, and that people would know that you're actually not good at your job, and that you continue to think that even though you really are actually really amazing at what you do, and you deserve the promotion and you deserve the praise, but you have this thing in the back of your head telling you that you're really just pretending and that you might be found out. Yeah, but feeling as though you're faking it till you make it, but really you made it and you really are actually amazing at it and you really are doing really, really well, but you still think you're faking it. Yeah. Yes. And then that is also paired with guilt. Exactly. And that's why the devil card has that idea of guilt behind it, is because then you continue to feel guilty because you think you're not doing enough, because you think you're not good enough, because you think that because of the imposter syndrome, because of everything that you have told yourself, because you think that you're faking it, because you think that you aren't doing things as well as you could be, or that you are just an imposter and that people are going to find out that really you're not as good as they think you are. All of these things cause guilt and shame when really in reality, you don't need to feel shame or guilt because you really are doing great and you really are helping others or doing whatever it is that you are trying to accomplish in life, whatever you are trying to prosper at, whatever you are trying to gain and become better at, and whatever you are trying to grab at in life, you are actually doing fantastic. But yet you feel trapped and you feel as though you're not good enough. You feel as though you're faking it. You feel guilty. You feel shame when it's all just in your head. But in your head is a strong word because that's a very literal feeling. So in your head is just like saying your broken arm is just in your arm. But because, mental health is just as real as physical health. But in reality, it's not true. You don't need to feel guilty. You don't need to feel shame. You don't need to feel stuck. You don't need to feel like an imposter. You really are doing amazing. You just can't see it. Yes, definitely. And because of everything that I'm saying, it can be tied to a lot of things. And like I said before in the previous card, it all depends on the cards that come up next to it. You are usually not going to be reading these cards the way that I'm doing it, alone and by themselves. So yes, it can also be associated with addiction. And because when it comes to addiction, especially when it comes to addiction recovery, there is so much imposter syndrome involved. There is so much guilt and so much shame involved that even when you are a recovering addict and you are doing well in recovery, you still feel as though you are not doing well, like you're hiding something from everyone, like you have to hide who you are, you're hiding this huge aspect of yourself, like you are never truly and actually good enough, and that your addiction always has this hold over you, and you constantly feel this idea of shame and guilt, and like you aren't actually ever going to make up for what you did or be good enough or truly heal or truly be better. And then same thing goes if you are in active addiction, that if you are an addict, then nothing that you do in life is ever going to actually be good or great or worth doing or something that should be praised because you're an addict, so you should feel guilt and shame, which of course none of that is true, but that would be something depicted by the devil. So, yep. Yeah, your self-talk is undermining you. That's a great way of putting it too. This card can symbolize many things, whether it's not that it can symbolize many things, but like there's many reasons for us to feel this guilt and this shame and feeling stuck and feeling shackled and feeling like we're not good enough. There are so many reasons that so many people feel this way. whether that's trauma, whether that's addiction, whether that's just the fact that, whether that's capitalism, whether that's so many things that exist in life that make us feel as though we can never be good enough, no matter how good we are doing, that it's never enough, and that one day somebody will find out that you've been faking it this whole time and that you're really not anything good or anything worth being proud of, when really that's not, none of that is true. Yeah, I struggle with this card too. I think that a lot of people end up getting this card in their readings. And that's why it is so important as well to look at the cards next to it. The cards next to it, depending on what kind of spread you're doing, will help tell you what they're going through that is making them feel this way. That's why it's a little bit hard and a little bit tricky to just pick out one card and solely focus on the definition of that, like the Tower. There's so much more that is part of a reading. It is normally not just one card. There's so much more context and so much more being said in an entire spread than just one single card. Okay, does anybody have anything, any questions or any more comments about the double card, Capricorn, and Saturn? Okay, so the next card that we are going to go through is Temperance. So Temperance, I have a picture up, so that's nice. So we don't have to go scour the internet for a picture of the card. So Temperance is represented by Sagittarius. And so a lot of times with the Temperance card, you will get a card that, and it's actually not really depicted in this card, which I kind of wish it was. So I don't know why I chose this card to necessarily put on here. I want to show you. So of course, now we do have to scour the internet. So I just want to show you the Temperance card. Is usually depicted with, yes, of course, this ha ha. So usually you will get this really interesting, oh, it's the same website, cool. So we usually get this image that shows water being turned into steam. And that is a wonderful depiction for the symbology of this card, which is why I really like to use it and why I picked out this picture to show you, is because Temperance is usually associated with water being turned into air. And usually when we talk about alchemy or even just in life and on Earth, the way that we turn water into steam is fire. And Sagittarius is represented by fire. And as we know from reading the fire definition that we read, fire is our action. And fire is the actions that you make every single day. And fire is the energy that exists inside of you that helps you to walk, that helps you to talk, that helps you to think and feel and grow. And it is also the energy that exists within the universe. It is heat, and it is passion, and it is excitement, but not the emotion of it, because that is going to definitely be water, like the emotions tied to excitement, but it is the energy that you gain when you get excited, and the actions that you make when you are passionate and when you are excited. And Sagittarius is a sign that is very, not only is it, you know, the very stereotypical fire, which is, you know, somebody who is very active and impulsive and always a go-getter, is doing 5 million things at once, and is super, super passionate and always wants to try new things and go on new adventures and doesn't really think before they act. And but Sagittarius, what's very special about Sagittarius, and why, and also very special about Temperance, is this idea of turning water into steam, which is, Sagittarius is known for always seeking knowledge, wanting to not only do a million things at once, but to become extremely knowledgeable about every single thing all at once. And Temperance is a card that represents turning a lot of that energy, a lot of that emotion, a lot of those impulsive, exciting adventures into wisdom and knowledge. And that tends to be the goal of a Sagittarius, is not only do I want to do everything, not only am I super, super excited about everything and I want to conquer the world and be extremely energetic all the time, but I also want to learn every single thing that there possibly is to learn. And Temperance is a very wise card. And it's also a very philosophical card. As you can tell in this one, we have a lot of symbology here that represents a lot of philosophical ideologies. You have the yin and the yang. And now that we've talked about this idea of turning emotions into thought, turning that excitement, that impulsivity, that joy, and all of that into knowledge and wisdom, I'm going to go back to the card on our page that we have as well. And this one, there's a lot of symbology as well for philosophical ideologies. Having one foot inside water and one foot on the ground is that idea of turning water into reality, turning your emotions and all of the things that you love, all of your empathy, into how can you actually apply that to the real world. And so the idea of Temperance is, how can you turn all of these extremely deep emotions and excitement and passion and lust and energy and actions into something that actually can be applied to real life, and not only help you become wiser, but help the people around you become more knowledgeable. And so Temperance, it becomes a very difficult card to read as well, because yes, balance is a wonderful way of saying it as well. Temperance does have a lot of aspects of balance in it. You can see with the cups, transferring water. You can see with the other picture that we showed of the having the black and white wings, having every single thing be extremely balanced, having a balance of your emotions, as well as being able to have logic and understanding and being grounded. You see a lot of balance in this, but also that idea of wisdom and knowledge and philosophy. And so this becomes kind of a more difficult card to read in somebody's actual real world, because how do you turn a really large philosophical ideology card, a card that is very based on like a philosophy, into like, here's what's going on in your life. And so a lot of times it is taking that aspect and idea of Sagittarius and fire, and taking that idea of turning your emotions into knowledge, and telling, when this card shows up in a spread, a lot of times it is about taking all of the things that you're feeling, taking all of your deep feelings that you're having right now, whether that's joy and excitement and love and passion and all of that, or it is depression and grief and anger and, whatever those emotions may be, and looking at them in a new way and trying to look at life in all aspects, being able to see the world as more than just the situation that you're going through, and looking at the big picture and looking at the world around you, and how can you turn these emotions into wisdom, and how can you make sure that you are being smart, and that you are thinking about all sides of the story, that you are thinking about all sides of the situation, that you are thinking about all aspects of what you're going through and what others are going through. How can you be somebody who can see things from all perspectives? And how can you be more balanced? How can you be more, how can you become, in this situation that you're going through, how can you see it from all angles and all perspectives? And a Sagittarius sometimes, and I think that that's so funny that Temperance is represented by Sagittarius, is that Sagittarius can tend to want to do so many things all at once, be so gung-ho and so excited that they want to do 500 million billion things, and they want to know everything and experience everything, that they forget that to truly learn all there is to learn about one thing, that you have to stop and you have to focus and you have to see things from all angles to truly actually master something. And that being the jack of all trades is wonderful, but that if you want to truly become the master of something, that you have to stop and pause and focus on one thing for a while. And Temperance reminds us of that. And that you have to, yeah. So it's a very big card. It's a very complex card. But I think a really great kind of keyword to tie this card with is taking all of that fire and all of that passion and all of that excitement and all of those emotions, and also all of that, energy and action, and turn it into wisdom, turn it into something that helps you see the world in all perspectives, helps you see the world in all angles, and helps you gain that balance and wisdom. Oh, the yellow triangle. That's wonderful that you brought that up. So did you notice, sorry, I wasn't looking at, so did you notice that in the card here that I showed you as well, that there's also the same triangle on the cauldron? There's going to be that triangle.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
There's,
noticed it there, and I also have my deck, and I noticed it on my deck too.
yes. So that is actually the alchemy symbol for fire.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
cool,
Which is another reason why it represents Sagittarius and fire.
awesome. The other thing I was wondering was about I saw yin and yang on the first one, and in mine there's not a yin and yang, but there's like a light and shadow kind of thing going on. And I wondered if those were kind of connected and what that meant.
Yes. So those are definitely connected. And same thing with this card and trying to create that idea of earth and water. And that is just that idea of creating that balance and of um, understanding things on all levels. And when you see that in the yin and the yang, and you see that in shadow and light, understanding that, for example, that for shadow to exist, light must exist. For light to exist, shadow must exist. And the same thing goes for the yin and the yang, that there, for bad to exist, good must exist. And for good to exist, bad must exist. And all things are just perspective. And to be able to gain a perspective on the world, to understand that all things are just perspective. To one person, it might be bad. To one person, it might be good. But in reality, it just is. And that is a way of gaining wisdom and learning that um, most things are just perspective and that it's just the way that you're looking at it. And if you looked at it from a different angle and from a different perspective, that you would see an entirely different story. There is so much to this card. There really is. It is. And that it there's also, and I think that's what's so funny about it being represented by Sagittarius, is that Sagittarius really is that fire element, that there is so much more to than just fire. When we talk about Leo and we talk about Aries, they are just so fire. Sagittarius Sagittarius is a little bit more emotional and a little bit more wise and a little bit more, it's a lot more air and a lot more water and a lot more earth. And Sagittarius is much more, it's represented by a lot more elements than just fire. And so is temperance. And it's really this big idea of gaining perspective, gaining wisdom, being able to see one situation from 15 different angles and from 100 different angles, being able to see the big picture, being able to turn water into steam, being able to turn emotions into wisdom, being able to understand that, like I said, without shadow, there would be no light. So you cannot just say, temperance is that reminder that you cannot just say that you only want positive, that you only work with positive, that only, positive vibes only, that doesn't work, because positive would not exist without the negative, that good would not exist without bad, that there's balance in all things, there's perspective in all things, and truly gaining wisdom and truly being able to see the big picture shows you that really everything is just human perspective, or just perspective in general, and that you have to stop for a minute, take a step back, and look at things from all angles. And this card is a lot. It's a hard one to give in readings because, you know, it's a, you know, if somebody asks you, you know, is my crush going to become my boyfriend? And you pull temperance, and it's like, okay, let me have a philosophical discussion with you about the ideologies of life, which becomes a process. So does anybody have any more to add about temperance? We could probably talk about temperance all night and discuss the ideologies within this card and the philosophies within this card, the philosophies of wisdom and good and bad and balance and integrity and compassion and being able and wisdom and gaining perspective on the universe and seeing things from all angles. It's really a card that we could have a whole class on temperance. But does anybody have anything to add about temperance? Okay. We went over death in the last class, so I'm not going to go over death. And we went, okay. I think, nice. I think we have officially covered yeah, we've officially covered every single card. Okay, so what that means is, and I know that for those of you who this is your first class, you're like, we only covered 3 cards, but that was it in this series. So that means that now, by tomorrow, you can go onto our YouTube because it's going to take me until tomorrow to upload all these. But you can go to our YouTube and watch all the major Arcana courses, and we will go over every single card in those videos. And that also means that next class, what we are going to do and how the next class is going to start is we are going to be giving each other readings. So if you are going to be in the next tarot card class, which, let me see if I already have it on the schedule. If I don't have it on the schedule already, then I will tell you when it's going to. So yes, okay. So our next tarot card class is going to be February 3rd. February 3rd at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So February 3rd at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we are going to be giving each other readings. We are going to start practicing. We're going to start learning different spreads, start discussing how to read these cards next to each other, which is going to be a whole different thing. Like you guys already pointed out to me, the tower is going to have a completely different meaning when it comes up next to, you know, the 2 of swords. It's going to have a completely different meaning if it comes up next to the 5 of pentacles. These cards meanings change depending on the context of the spread, the context of the reading. So next class, we're going to start learning different spreads, giving each other readings, and yeah, it's going to be really fun. I can't wait. And if any of you guys would like a reading, I'm going to be giving readings as well. So please come to class and get your cards read. And I promise that giving readings is going to help so much with understanding what these cards mean, so much more than me just giving you, you know, an astrological and planetary and symbolic and elemental definition of each card. Getting the chance to actually read these in a spread is going to give a whole new perspective on the cards. Yeah. Of course. Thank you so much for being here. I know it feels like 2 hours went by so fast. I cannot believe that it has already been 2 hours. So thank you all so much for being here. Does anybody have any questions before we go, did everybody get the link to the YouTube channel? Did everybody get the link to the website? Did everybody get all of that? I'm so glad that you learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here. I love teaching these classes. I've been doing it forever. It's so much fun. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for our next class. I get really excited about the ones where we finally get to give each other readings.